Is it going to move?
If they reset it.
Okay. Um, w- we're going to start talking tonight about some of the events, the period, basically, at least begin talking about the Trump tax plan, which will be under consideration in Congress very, very soon. Talking about some of the major aspects of it, what is actually going to happen, who in general gets help, who in general gets hurt. And being that this is old farts, I'm sure we'll talk about a few other things as well. So the tax program, as it was brought down by Donald Trump earlier this week, basically had 7 elements that was designed to simplify the tax code and put more money in the pockets of at least some people. That's actually a little extreme. I think most people will benefit, at least initially, from the tax portion of it. The problem is going to be, subject for probably another show, what gets cut in order to pay for it. But I printed out something which talked about what the tax program is. It's going to reduce the number of tax brackets, which I'm not quite sure how that makes anybody better off or not, but that's neither here nor there. For the middle class, they're going to double the standard deduction, which in large measure means that most people will no longer itemize because you have to have some pretty extensive expenses in order to justify itemizing when the standard deduction covers you pretty well. It's also going to repeal the AMT, which basically says the AMT was established because rich people for many, many years were paying no taxes at all. None. Nada. And so they said if you make a lot of money, we're going to limit the kinds of deductions you can have and how much deductions you can actually take so that you will pay some tax. A perfect example is, I don't know if you guys saw, but the basic 1040 Donald Trump from 2005.
Right. That was most of what he paid.
Right.
Which I
It
think
would
was
have been
about
3.5 million, and it ended up being about 35 million.
right.
And that was totally because of AMT.
Yeah.
And have we seen his what he's paid since
No,
then?
no.
That's the only one.
That's
we
the
have.
big question out there is exactly how much he pays or what he pays.
I think the tax
what on.
return that we saw was carefully selected and provided to say, see, I pay taxes.
I mean, that's why he said he pays minimal tax because that he's smart. He's right for that. He's using the tax code to his benefit.
Yeah. Some people pay no taxes
Yes.
and they're smart, but the IRS comes back and says, no,
No.
you're not that smart.
Okay.
But evidently Trump,
Trumps them.
yeah. Another thing is they're going to lower the capital gains tax. The idea being if you invest money, you take a risk and you should not pay as much as somebody who's just working for a living because they theoretically take no risk.
And
Unless,
again,
of course,
that's
they're
another-
working for Donald Trump. But that's
It's another
neither here nor
change that
Yeah.
disproportionately helps people who already have a lot of funds.
Yes.
The wealthy.
But the idea, as you brought up, Bob, is that those people who are given that benefit, apparently they are willing to invest. They are willing to take risk. That's the assumption.
Yes.
That's the
That's
assumption.
the concept of the
Yes.
capital gains tax. And there's some logic to that. I'd like to revisit that after we go through this
Okay.
list because
Okay,
there
okay.
are a number of things that could be done to make it fairer,
Oh.
for lack of a better term. Another thing that they're talking about is repealing the inheritance tax. Now, the inheritance tax says if you, I think it's 20 million. If somebody's estate is over $20 million, the federal government taxes them. But a lot of people say, I have a farm, and my farm is worth a lot of money, but if you're going to force me to start paying taxes, then we have to sell the family farm. $20 million, most of us don't have an estate like that.
Unfortunately not.
And there could easily, again, something to talk about after, you could gradually say if your thing is worth 20 million, you got to pay some tax. If it's worth 50 million, you got to pay more tax. 100 million, you're going to have to pay more tax. 10 billion, according to Donald Trump, you might have to pay a lot more tax. But that's another area to be discussing. Another one is they're getting rid of most of the deductions that people take. They're preserving mortgage and charity, among others. And that's kind of reasonable, except, again, if you're doubling the standard deduction, the vast majority of the middle class doesn't need that deduction anymore. And so, again, it's something that will help the upper classes more. But at least it's some reasonable amount.
But again,
Yes,
this is if there is that if the overall deductible limit is raised, then probably, as you said, the mortgage interest or whatever is no good. You can't deduct it.
Well,
because
less
it's going to be
people
less.
can.
Okay,
It's going to be much less.
Right.
Let's get through that because
Oh, and
there's some.
yeah. And the
Some
last
really
one
good one.
is the corporate rate. It is true, demonstrably true, that the United States has the highest corporate income tax. And conservatives have for a long time said, well, if the corporation pays taxes, why do the individuals? If the individuals are going to pay taxes, why should the corporation have to pay taxes? Double taxation. This is a plan to cut the corporate income tax down theoretically, meaning if the corporation's paying less taxes, then they're going to expand and create more jobs. The question comes up, if the people don't have any money, who is the corporation going to sell their products and services to? And if they don't have anybody to sell it to, why are they going to expand? But I've put too much of my own attitudes in. But this is the plan that as Trump has proposed, and will be at least the basis for what the House and later the Senate will come up with.
Yes, now there has been much discussion around this plan. And if you listen to everyone, they do not believe that this is a good plan. So we have a lot of people who are against this plan because they don't see the benefit of the plan. And in fact, it was said that the only group that really benefit from this plan is the wealthy.
The extreme wealthy, the top 1% is
Yeah.
what I'm hearing are the ones that are really going to benefit.
It will probably benefit people with more than $25 million. I think that's what looks like to me. But at the same time, doesn't that, if a lot of people don't like it, are they all Democrats, or do the Republicans, I think, like this?
I think in theory they do. I know, I don't remember which Republican House member it was, but one of them said, like the plan as written is not going to get passed. I mean, it's going to it's going to go through both chambers, and definitely things will be changed, new ideas we put in. But I mean, this is sort of like, I don't think any president's tax plan ever gets passed, right, as it's written. It's just pretty much, this is where we want to start the conversation, now go through the lengthy and sometimes messy process of, trying to get it passed through the House and the Senate.
But conceptually, let's.
Yeah, it is sort of like a statement of ideals from the White House.
So if you cut the tax brackets from 7 to 3, who benefits? Who gets hurt? I don't see the logic why this is a major portion of the tax, except perhaps the optics. It's so much simpler.
But as long as you have the deductions available for certain groups, it is still complicated. But it's not complicated for the vast majority because they will fall below that what you particular ceiling. I forgot what the number is. So they not they. I should say probably we all probably will fall below that limit, and so we will lose all the deductions, most of them, except for
And
maybe
one
mortgage. And then will that really benefit us actually in the long run?
And one of the deductions that people are afraid of losing is the health benefits. And that it says that a poor person will start paying an extreme amount more.
That's a different bill. That's the health care bill.
That's the health care
The
plan.
two are
We
very tied
can
together.
talk
They-
about-
they're
we can
inter-
talk about
okay.
that as well. But
Okay.
this one is just the
But
tax
it's
program.
related to
It is.
taxes.
Actually, you talked about the capital gains
Yeah.
reduction. I mean, the exact amount that they're reducing it is the amount that was put in for the Affordable Care Act in order to try to, boost that. If I'm not mistaken.
No, the Affordable Care Act is an additional capital gains tax on the wealthy. It's 3.5%, I believe.
Okay.
On the wealthy only, you have to be earning over 200,000. You have to have income of over 200,000 a year as a single person in order for that to cut in.
But isn't that what was supposed to get? They were going to get rid of that
From what I read,
to kill
but-
kill Obamacare.
From what I
Right.
got from the Times article that we were talking about, capital gains tax going from 23.8 to 20, and that 3.8% tax was used to fund part of the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's like directly, the tax plan is also directly targeting, the Affordable
Yeah,
Care
that's. I mean, that's the plan. That's
Yeah,
the
but
plan
what's-
actually they
What
have.
you're incorrect about is that 3.8 was tacked on top of whatever you were paying.
Right. Yeah.
If you were a higher, not wealthy, but higher income person, and you had investments, capital gains investments, you would pay this over the top of whatever the tax plan. If you were paying 15% or 30% or whatever you were paying for your capital gains tax, this would be an addition.
Right, and that addition is what
yeah,
this
that-
plan is proposing to eliminate.
With what the the Trump Care plan.
No, the tax
No,
plan.
no, the
No,
tax.
this tax plan is separate and distinct.
No, but actually,
Well, they're both. The attempt is to get rid of both of them.
Right, I'm just
Yeah.
saying that the part of the tax plan
Right.
does actually have a provision to lower the capital gains tax by an amount that was set aside for Affordable Care Act.
It's actually further. I think the long-term capital gains tax. Okay, I don't have the numbers in my head, unfortunately, but I think it used to be 15 and 25, and this is going to make it less, but I don't remember how much.
But I mean, but they did have I forgot which provision it is. They were actually trying to craft a provision within the tax bill that would indirectly kill Obamacare.
Well,
And
yeah, that's a
and
given.
that might be the one they were
Yeah,
they were
that's from
targeting.
Okay, but the House-backed plan that just got passed by
Yeah,
the
that's
House
separate.
gets rid of that provision, which, by the way, is the only reason Obamacare made it through the Supreme Court, because it was called a tax,
It was called
and
a tax.
therefore the government could do it.
Right.
Well, things are so interrelated, the taxes and the health care. And so people see this, even though it's separate, people see it as one thing. And as a result of that, many people are really frightened of going through something like this. And it is said that the persons that are impacted the most are the people who have so little. They have no money. The poor people, and even middle class people will be impacted regarding this. And so, if we are to, if this is to pass, and today I understand it would be called Trump Care instead of Obamacare,
Okay.
it would be
We're
Trump
talking
Care.
about health care, not this, but okay.
Okay.
Just make sure we're,
If the
right.
changes occur, then we need to be prepared for it. And tell me, how would you be prepared for these changes?
well, again, talking about health care.
Health care or
on
this
Medicare.
three? Okay.
Yeah. I'm on Medicare, so that's, for the moment, I'm not affected. I can tell you that I have a friend whose wife is 62, and she was going to retire, and she is not retiring now
Right.
because she had cancer.
Oh.
And as a result, if she loses her health care, the cost for the insurance, forget anything else, the cost for the insurance would make force one or the other of them to go back to work because they could not afford it, and they did very well. They had good jobs, they saved money, they did all the right things, but because the rules would be such, perhaps in Florida, which is where they want to retire to, that they could not afford to retire.
That's what they are saying. In fact, that the premiums will go down, but at the same time,
For
they are not saying
Richard, they will go down.
they will go down. But they are not saying the other piece is that a lot of people are going to be will not be able to afford the health care because they, number one, their condition will be, those particular conditions are going to place them in the groups, which is high cost, and premiums will be exorbitant, and they will not be able to afford it. And that means, that's what some people are projecting, that will be more than 20 million people. And I don't know how true those figures are, but it's going to be a huge number because you will be classified high risk groups, low risk groups, and accordingly the Trump care is going to kind of avoid saying that the premiums are big. Premiums will be low for some of the people, but then it was going to exclude a whole bunch of other people.
Right. According to the Congressional Budget Office,
Yeah.
estimates that just came out yesterday,
Yeah.
right? It was 20, their estimates, and they're not always 100% on, but it was, 23 million people who currently have insurance would either lose it or just not be able to afford it. And disproportionately, that would be lower income and people on Medicaid.
And elderly people,
And
even,
elderly people,
even
yeah.
people who have good jobs in their 60s might well find themselves paying 4 or 5 times as much as you're charged.
I mean,
And also, by the way, no guarantee of what benefits they would get for that insurance.
I mean, the argument is that, because that's what the argument which is easily comprehensible for people. Well, if you are a man, why should you be paying for a woman's things? And if you are a young person, why should you be paying for the older person's things? I mean, this is how people, how the promoters of the health care, Trump care, are actually trying to promote it by appealing to, of course, when you are a young person, why do you care about older people? Forget about them. And same thing about men and women, young and old, pregnant and non-pregnant. So this becomes a kind of battle within the society without considering the overall problems.
And do you see the tax plan that has been put forth? Do you see that as simple and useful for everyone? The 10%, the 25%, the 35%. Do you find that useful, or what do you think about that?
I mean, right now when you look at this, the major item which immediately grabs you is the deductible piece. What did you call
Standard
it?
deduction.
Standard deduction. And on the one hand, it looks appealing. Standard deduction will become big, but then you have people who have medical costs, who have and some people who do not have medical costs. So they are all lumped together now. Then who is going to benefit there? Then you have people with a whole bunch of other deductions, and you said the charities will be allowed.
Right. By the way, I have to be fair. I believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that when you go to itemize, if for example you need to itemize, I believe that medical will in fact be deductible. I don't know that for a fact. It's not one of the things that was listed as being, we're going to preserve this. Because if you don't have medical and you don't have some of these other things, I have absolutely no idea of what you would gain by itemizing.
Well, what happens in tax code is that the medical deductions are allowed only if there is a certain percentage.
Yes.
The threshold is, I forgot what the number is.
It's gone up, and it caught me by surprise when I was doing my taxes this year. But yeah, there's a threshold at which point, once you get beyond, it's a percentage of your income, I think.
Percentage of income.
Then you
trigger
then you can do it. But your insurance that you're paying gets in there. So if you're 62 and you're paying $1,000 a month for a minimal insurance policy, at least you get to deduct some of it.
Yes, if you reach that threshold, if you just be a little one here down the threshold, you don't get any of that. So what good is it? But I don't know what the details are here.
I don't know. It was not in the article. I have not heard anybody say yes or no.
That's another thing that you have to remember is that this was like a bare bones outline of a tax proposal. It was not anything that would actually could ever be voted on because a lot of the details aren't in there. It's just a sort of inspirational document, so to speak, to say this is the sort of thing, the direction we want to go.
And everyone should let them know what they think of the proposal, because one of the things that frightened me about the health plan, tax plan, is that if you have a pre-existing issue, then automatically you're paying more for the insurance and so forth, and that is frightening.
Well, the thing that people do not understand, but insurance is in fact two things. One, it's a guessing risk, and two, the idea that not everybody who buys insurance is going to get their money back. You buy insurance, all the money is thrown into a pool, and then as needed, people are paid if they have a problem. For example, I've never had a fire in my house. I'm still supposed to pay the same thing that this gentleman over here who had his house burned down 2 years ago is paying.
Right.
Because otherwise, why have insurance at all?
And that is the cornerstone of, Obamacare or Trump, Affordable Care Act versus the American Health Care Act. Obamacare versus Trump Care is that the only way that Obamacare worked was by having the sort of the mandate, the individual mandate to be to sign up, so that people who are healthy at this moment at least are supplementing people who need to use insurance, and if that part of it is reduced, because I think under Trump's plan, it's if you want to sign up for insurance or if you let yourself lapse, you have to pay a certain higher amount for a temporary amount of time. It's not really like a individual mandate the way Obamacare was or is.
By the way, that works really well if I'm an employer, because if you piss me off, I'm going to fire you, and if you can't find employment in 3 months,
you're done.
Boy, you're in trouble.
Yeah, well, it is true that it could be used as sort of a, a way of sort of keeping people company loyal.
But at the same time, if you have people, you have people who promote the affordable American Healthcare Act with the notion that you do not need to be part of the group that is high risk. I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive to the insurance, the general insurance idea. But they are promoting it as, well, why should you be grouped with the pregnant woman? You should be separated. And that way you have, of course, you lump people together who are similar, and of course the premiums are going to go up, and people are going to lose insurance. And but another piece what you brought up is the pre-existing condition. Now, what is a pre-existing condition? If you go through that list, there are a lot of things you would wonder. You wonder, is that a pre-existing condition? And so a lot of people are going to lose their insurance because of that.
Well,
And
pre-existing conditions are, by their very nature, something that's happened in the past.
yes, but they have listed them, a whole bunch of them actually.
Yeah, but not all of them.
They're not all of them, but
Yeah.
the major ones which you see, you wonder who came up with that.
One of our regular panelists used to say that her daughter was uninsurable because she was female.
Yeah, well,
It's a pre-existing
that's a
condition.
pre-existing condition.
And one of the things that they tried to do, and they did in Massachusetts before that, was say you can't, a female cannot be charged more because they might have a baby, which is a very expensive thing to have happen, and happens a fair amount of time. So everybody else pays a little bit more to make that a good thing, because we've decided that having children is a good thing in this society.
Yeah, it sort of helps keep our society alive.
Yeah.
Well, there are a variety of things, including immigration, but we're
Yes.
trying to cut back on that.
We got to get the people somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, let's take a look at these things and say, really seriously, run through all seven of them and say, do they make sense to you as an individual and to the society as a whole? I don't really see how multiple, having three tax brackets as opposed to seven makes a great deal of difference. But it's not that important to me.
Well, if you have only three tax brackets,
Right.
it simplifies the system,
How?
because then the IRS folks don't have to worry about seven; they have to worry about three.
I was
That's
in the
all.
computer business a long time. The computer can figure that out
No,
really
well,
easy.
See, you're talking logical. It's not logical. It's a question of how you appeal to the masses. Is seven better or three? Three is better.
So three.
But
Yeah, if your
not if
argument
I'm the,
is-
the-
Yes.
the guy in the middle who gets stuck paying 25%, when if there were seven, I might be paying 22%.
Yes, I
Yeah,
know.
but I
But-
think he's right, though. They're selling this
Yes.
on a simplification
Right.
of the tax
That's all.
code,
Okay.
and obviously 3 is simpler than 7.
It's probably simplification, but the thing that I am concerned about is not the person at the top or the person in the middle class. I'm concerned about the people who cannot afford this particular system. The
Talking about the
10%.
tax program, the people on the bottom are not an issue because they aren't paying taxes anyway.
Right.
It doesn't matter what we do with the tax code as long as they get the services they need. It doesn't matter.
People who were poor pays taxes too, you know.
Well, not income taxes. They pay taxes when they buy toothpaste.
Sales tax, sales tax.
Sales tax. They pay taxes because their rent, part of their rent, goes to cover the taxes of the owner. Everybody pays one way or another, but in terms of income taxes, the poor are really not an issue because they're not paying
then what
anyway.
is
They're
As
not getting
far
any
as-
reduction on the zero
as
they're
the
paying now.
brackets go. But
Yeah.
I was listening to the radio earlier today, and they were talking about the impacts of this tax plan, and one of them would just be, like you said, it's a cut to a lot of services. Like a lot of they were interviewing a woman who works in South Carolina with poor children, and she said like most of the budget for her program could go away under this, and so if we're not investing in the poor children, providing things like food stamps or the START program, I think it's called. There's going to be long-term effects from that.
Lunch programs for kids.
The WICs.
Yeah, after-school
Try
programs.
Meals on Wheels.
Yes.
Yeah,
And if that's gone,
And that was specifically cut, not in the tax program, in the proposed budget.
as a whole.
Yeah. The attitude, as was promoted by the man who was making the presentation, the Office of Management and Budget, said this is a taxpayer program, not a user program. And that's fair way to look at things. Just understand who is not getting the services because there is no money. There are several things to describe here which also say it's not a revenue neutral program because it makes several assumptions, and it also uses the same big pool of money for two different reasons, two different purposes, and pay different people out of the same dollars.
Well, in presenting this
Yeah.
data, why are people so provocative? You know, perhaps the average person would have an opportunity to think about things and come to a conclusion that perhaps this tax program will work for me. But from the beginning, things are presented in such a provocative way. I'm going to take this, I will take this way. And it has really frightened people about the new tax proposal.
I hope they're frightened.
I think one of the reasons for that is Trump plays to his base a lot, and a lot of the arguments that, you know, even if it's not in their best interest, a lot of people are sold on the idea of like your taxes are paying for people who like don't want to work or people who are just freeloading, and they don't. There's a resentment there that I think some of the messaging around this stuff plays to.
I mean, that's a very valid point again, because you look at the Trump base, they voted for Trump, but on the other hand, he's going to kill Obamacare, and the same people
Right.
were benefiting from Obamacare, and they're going to lose all that. And what is going to happen?
Well,
But they still believe in Trump.
They're just beginning to realize the town hall thing. Some of it is engineered, I
Yes.
will give you that. But there are a lot of people who are beginning to realize, wait a minute, 10 years ago, I didn't have any insurance. I couldn't afford it. I just prayed that I would survive or die quickly. And then Obamacare came in, and there's all kinds of problems with Obamacare. But I have insurance.
Yes, I mean,
I went to the doctor. They found something. They fixed it.
So that's the big question: is you know, will the you know either one of these two things pass? You know, get through the House and the Senate, just because they right now, Republican Party is Trump's party. He ran on a platform that is very different than what they're putting out. I mean, he talked about how healthcare was going to be better than ever. Everybody was going to be covered. Pre-existing conditions will all be covered. Those are the promises that he made. But now when it gets down to, real politics and these things start coming out, I mean, that's not what is actually in there.
You think he's not saying the same stuff when when he managed to help push through the second try on Trump care?
Right, but
He didn't say, hey, we're going to cover pre-existing conditions. You may not be able to afford it. We'll give you $3 billion over 10 years or 30 billion, whatever the hell it was.
He's still saying the same thing, but once the reality starts to come out, I mean, people are gonna. You think his supporters will turn on him, or do you think that the other Republicans will have a little bit more vision to look down the road and say, listen, if we do this as extreme as it is proposed right now, this is going to bite us in 4 and 8 and
notice
10
that
years.
they passed it in the House. What you were saying
but none of
managed to
them
kill
read
it the first time, but one of the reasons why it got killed the first time was it wasn't extreme enough.
Well, for some, and then it was too extreme for
Yeah, but not
others.
it didn't balance out. The Senate, we believe, only because they haven't spoken yet, that they're more reasonable and they will do something to fix all this stuff. There's no guarantee of that.
I mean,
No.
you have to look at this Republican control right now. You have the White House is Republican, Congress is Republican. Several years ago, a few years ago, you had this same situation flipped.
Yeah.
And the
8 years ago.
Democrats, 8 years ago, and the what did Democrats do? They rammed the Obamacare through with all these little
hundred
shenanigans or whatever, and without any Republican support. And the Republicans are doing the same thing, and they're going to get this passed. But they don't realize what happened to Democrats in the immediately afterwards in the congressional elections.
I think they do realize it. That's why I think some of them might try to take the long view and realize that if we do some of these things, that it's going to affect us.
I hope they
In
do,
the
but
Senate.
it looks like majority of them are not. Majority of them saying, we got power, let us use it. We got to
The
Well,
guy-
I'm
the guy-
promulgate everything we need, we want, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Well, I'm hoping that the Senate will step back and be a little bit more observant and make the decision for the people that are supporting them. And the decision is not necessarily approving the Trump care.
But doing what?
But
But
Well, coming out with a
re-
version that is in the middle between the proposed Trump care and Obamacare or the
And-
Affordable
and-
Care Act, something that is a little bit more of a balance.
Okay, try this one on for side. Part of the Trump care, they're going to cut, they're trying to cut spending like crazy. So what they're doing is they're cutting a third of the budget for the people in Atlanta who investigate rare diseases and try to take care of the health care of the population as a general term, not individuals. They're getting rid of that
yes.
because it costs money. And all the money that was collected under Obamacare to try to help the health of the country is coming out of the rich people's pocket. How do we know that? Because what are they cutting?
Right.
They're cutting anything that rich people have to pay for. Perfect example. This is the height of hypocrisy. We're going to improve your health care. Obama said if you have, if you're a CEO of an insurance company and you make more than $500,000 a year, the excess that you make, you can make whatever the corporation is willing to give you, cannot be deducted from the corporate taxes. They're eliminating that
Yeah, there's no doubt
because
that
that's really going to help your health care.
both the changes for healthcare and the tax bracket, I mean, it's been pretty widely reported, are both going to disproportionately help
Yes.
very wealthy people. And one other aspect of the tax plan that I wanted to ask you guys about is the projection of how it's going to help. The growth that they're going to happen. They say this is going to help balance the budget, but they rely on like a 3% annual growth for the United States, which we haven't had in forever. Do you think? But what do you think if we lower corporate tax rate by from 39 to 15, things like that? Is there going to be a spurring effect in the economy?
How can there be a spurring effect if you don't have customers? The key thing that every businessman knows is the most important thing he has is a customer. And what is a customer? A customer is somebody who wants what the businessman wants to sell and has the money to pay for it.
Well, we have customers. We have customers. We have customers in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
We have customers in China.
Mostly what they're
We
buying
have customers
is
in
guns
yeah, that's
and
okay.
airplanes.
As long as they pay.
Well,
Well,
we're
Yeah,
not
but
talking-
they pay.
Well, we're talking about companies, not necessarily the
Well,
by the way, there's
those
companies.
are
Yeah, I know.
companies.
Well,
When
those are
Saudi
companies, but-
Arabia buys stuff from us, it's not made by the government.
It's made
Yeah,
by companies.
made by
Alright,
Boeing.
you're right on that. But what I'm talking about is, I think their argument would be, if you cut down a corporate tax rate, they're going to be able to, hire more people.
To
They're-
do what?
Well, I just
That's my question. If I don't have a customer, why am I going to
won't they-
hire more
but
people?
Why does this mean that they don't have a customer? It's like that's
Well, number one, you have to assume that there are going to be now more customers.
now let me just say that in hearing some of this, I became fearful, and one of the fears that I had related to they will increase what monies and benefits that they give to veterans. And my first thought is, does that mean that we are headed toward another war with things like this? It's a little bit frightening because we put that with the idea that all the other things are happening and they give the veterans more, and then we have banned, or we want to ban so many people coming to this country, so we will have difficulties here, and I don't want to see a war.
I think if there is a war, all the assumptions go away. Maybe we'll have growth because you have a lot of disposables in a
Yes.
war, but what happened to the veterans when I was growing up, if you were a veteran, you had any problem and you wanted to go to the Veterans Administration, you went.
Yeah.
I stubbed my toe. Nobody asked if you stubbed your toe 5 years ago when you were in the service. You're a veteran. You go to the Veterans Administration. Today, I'm told that you have to prove you're a veteran. You have to prove that what happened to you is a direct result of your service because they didn't have any money. So they had to figure out how the hell are we going to provide whatever services we can to as many people as possible. So they started putting in all this stuff. They're not changing that, from my understanding.
That is what they need
Yeah.
to change. That is what I was also going to say, that they need to change that part where
Okay.
they are looking for excuses to not treat veterans, and they need care. I
Absolutely.
mean, a lot of people who are homeless veterans need care because they don't get it because of all those all those conditions they involve,
I have the
including a whole
feeling-
bunch of things.
I have a feeling that a lot of the homeless veterans aren't going to the Veterans
They're not going.
Administration, and there are limits to what the Veterans Administration can do. But if somebody comes in and has to prove
Yes, well, that's not good.
over an extended period of time what happened to them, then we have a problem. But if you go back to the way it was when I was growing up, you better come up with a hell of a lot more money than any of the proposals that I've seen.
Well, that's a given. If you increase services, you have to have more money.
But we're not
Of course
cutting
we're but
money.
No,
but-
you're
but-
and we're redistributing what little we're keeping.
yeah, but
yes.
at the
You're
same time,
taking from one group and
Yeah,
giving to the other group.
to answer the other question about corporate things, what I was thinking is that if you lower the corporate tax level threshold, what people are saying, I'm not a corporate person. What people are saying is that will be an incentive, of course, to invest. But that's a problem. Do you have customers? But what people are also saying is it will be an incentive for the corporations to bring all the money from overseas to here, and
Yes.
then
Another thing.
invest.
Amnesty for
Yes.
corporations.
And
Amnesty.
and invest here. But then that again begs the question what Bob is raising. If you brought all that money here, but you don't have any customers, what are you going to do?
What you're
Well,
going to do,
that's
let me tell you what you're going to do, because I've been researching this. If you have more money than you need, you're going to go buy something. Now you
Yes.
can buy control, etc. The easiest thing to do is to buy your competitors.
Yeah. of
Okay,
course, you
I'm
gotta-
going to buy my competitors. A, I don't have to do as much research and development. B, I can charge more. And C, the first thing I'm going to do when I buy a competitor is get rid of all the duplication.
course.
So I'm going to reduce employment. Doesn't that work exactly like we want?
Well, that's the Bain model, right?
Well, but that is how, if I invest in something, I investing for a reason. I want to make
Yeah.
some money. Okay, that's fair. We're capitalists. We understand that. But if I'm investing in something that's already there, I have to pay the people who currently own it more than they think they
Yes.
can make, at least in the short term. So I'm overpaying, in theory, for what I'm going to get back right away. So the first thing I have to do is reduce my costs so that I'm not going to go broke. How do you reduce costs? You reduce employment.
Yeah, you reduce.
There's other argument. So, all right, you've got a very we're talking the machinations of evil corporate Wall Street, but we're talking also about small businesses.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I think the argument, and now again, I don't believe that this budget or this tax plan would give us that 3% growth to help pay for it in the end. But I do think that there is some validity to the argument that if you have a small business owner and he owns a restaurant and he's paying nearly 40% in taxes, and all of a sudden that's going to be reduced to 15%. There is a good chance that they may open up a second restaurant. because they'll have the capital to do it, and then hire new people. Those people who get hired now have jobs. They can be customers for other businesses. So there's where your customers come from.
Okay.
So the less money is going to the government to funnel for services, but more people are holding on, and therefore there could be more activity.
I want to make 2 points, so give me a second. First thing is, I'm going to open up a second restaurant. Where are the people that are going to go to that second restaurant going to come from? Maybe from a third restaurant that now you're taking over. So all the people that you're hiring are actually getting laid off from the previous restaurant. But I'll give you another one, which I think is more important. One of the things they're doing is they're talking about corporate tax rates, and they want to reduce it. Right now we have a flat tax. Your restaurant owner who's making $5,000 profit is paying the same corporate rate as General Electric is supposed to pay. They don't pay anything, but that's a different story. What would happen if we have graduated corporate tax rates? This mom and pop store shouldn't be paying nearly as much as the guy whose CEO is making with their other incentives $100 million a year.
And that's one reason why everyone wants to bring in the immigrants, because they bring the immigrants in and they are not making the same amount of money that others that has been here and live here. And so they bring the immigrants in to try to reduce everything and make this second service that they open, make them make money, and then another place get opened up and they bring more immigrants in, and that's the philosophy that we want to have, I guess.
And I understand some people who are angry at illegal immigrants coming in, and because they're working for less, because the business owner may not even be mentioning that they're paying this money out, they're hiding the money in other things, really screws the guy who actually is living here, who may also be an immigrant, by the way, but he's at least operating in the open. That I understand that logic, and I think that's a real concern, and I don't really have a good answer. I can tell you that I have, over the years, helped out a number of people who've ended up in nursing homes. And I can tell you that the people who are wiping those people's asses, and eventually will be mine, are in many cases illegal immigrants, because nobody else will work for the amount of money these people are being paid.
The other larger question which you raised is about having mom and pop store not pay any taxes.
Well, no, paying less.
Paying less, but the problem with this three level taxation is that you don't care about those people. You care about the higher brackets, not the lower ones.
My point is, you make the tax rate being reduced to 15% for the mom and pop restaurant owner. Fine, I'm in favor. I want to help that guy.
That's not going to work. That's not going to happen.
I don't want him to have the same benefits as General Electric. I can tell you that the farm program is passed year after year after year, trying to protect the family farm. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
The
Protects
corporate
Monsanto.
farm is taking all these benefits that have been provided for the family farm, and making unbelievable
there are
fortunes.
subsidies for everything available on if you have a farm.
But the family guy doesn't get that.
No, because families don't exist that way.
Well, even
There are
when
fewer.
they do,
There are fewer.
They're not big enough to take advantage of it. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the concept that was provided in the original income tax program, which said you got more, you pay more, because you're going to get more benefits ultimately than the poor schlub who's just getting by. And you want to encourage the small businessman who's the job creator. I'm sure you've heard that over and over again. Charge him less. When he gets to be really successful, then you can charge him more.
But
Nobody says don't give me that $1 million because I'm going to have to give 400,000 of it back to the government. I don't want the million. Of course, they want the million. They don't want to pay the 400,000. I understand that. But if ultimately you win the lottery and they take out of your check, you won $1 million, they take out $400,000.
Yeah. Wow.
And you say thank you because you got $600,000 you didn't have before.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that's why you buy the ticket.
And I agree with you on your point that, you know, if you want to reduce the rate, but you could have it so that the small business person, you know, pays a less, you know, a lower rate than a big corporation. That I think that's a fine point and nothing that I'd argue against. The point that you brought up earlier, that when the restaurant owner opens up the second place, the only way he's going to make money is by, you know, stealing customers from another, you know, party. I don't think that's sort of like there's like this idea that there's like a cap on commerce, and I think the idea is that like as more people have more money to invest locally, to invest in their businesses, there'll be more customers. It's not necessarily always going to be taking away from the other person.
But today, not talking about what's going to happen in the future because we really don't know. You go out to dinner or lunch or whatever, how many times a week?
Maybe once a week.
Okay. If Margaret opens up a restaurant, are you going to say, oh, that's great, I'm going to go out twice a week? You have enough money to go out twice a week?
Well, maybe if I'm paying less in taxes, I'll go out twice a week.
Okay.
I think that's the idea.
That's a
or
fair
if another place comes up, if I'm making a minimum wage and then, you know, and then another business is able to open that is able to pay more, and I get that job, then maybe I will be able to get, you know, go out more often.
But at the same time, you were asking how will this tax plan get passed, and this is how it's going to get passed. It's going to get passed in the lower house, and then in the Senate, what Trump is going to do is, or the Republicans are going to do is, they're going to bring up that infrastructure money game,
Yes.
and that is going to lure a lot of people and jump onto this bandwagon, and that's going to get this passed. That's
well,
it.
There's the other
And-
question.
In part. By the way, they're also going to privatize. So
Well,
instead of
Those are details. You're
Yeah.
going to details, but you get votes on emotions, not working on at
Understood.
intellectual and those bookish thingies and all those things. Details. People don't go into all that.
but hopefully
And
discussions like this will
can people say that they would support setting the system up if our president give us a copy of his tax returns from the then
Yeah.
until the present?
Some Democrats have said that they would oppose it just until, you know, he
Yeah, but
releases his tax return.
yeah, but I don't
that
know
brings up
that-
another
yeah.
question: is in this political climate, will these things get passed at all? I mean, Wall Street pretty much came out a week ago and said that they didn't think that. That they didn't think this was going to get passed
Yep.
this year. The whole, you know, that Trump bubble that has happened since the election burst because they were looking at the writing on the wall, seeing the FBI investigation, all these other scandals, and they said, no, this is not going to happen.
By the way, the Trump bubble was continuing. Today
Yeah.
it went up
Or it had at least gone down.
0.5%, and it's basically been up week over week since December.
I know there was a fall because there was talk from.
Yeah, there was a small fall. It was one day.
But the whole idea about this is that as long as the Trump folks and Republicans keep on saying what you read in all the newspapers is all fake, the Trump base is going to stay together, and the Republicans are going to get themselves together and ram it through. I'm sure of that.
Yeah.
And
But I may like it
once
or
it's
not, but
gone,
that's different.
Once it's gone, it ain't coming back easily. In the same as
Yes.
what took 4 years for Obamacare to even get close to
Yes.
working the way it was supposed to work. And you tear it down. Now you try to bring it back
Yeah.
when you realize, hey, I didn't know Grandma was going to be
Yeah.
thrown out of the nursing home and die on the street, and I have to pay for the funeral too. You know, insult after injury. You don't get it back right away.
I mean, that's what Trump mentioned. Trump said this, that who knew this.
It was so
That it was
complicated.
so
Right.
complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, it is complicated, but that's going to.
And a lot of people knew that.
But they're not going to worry about that at the moment. At the moment, they want to ram it through, and
Right.
that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's
Well-
why a lot of the Republican leadership is sort of holding its nose about, some of Trump's other, issues like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, because they're just, like you said, hoping that while they have the two chambers and the
Yeah.
White House, they can push
Yeah.
this stuff
They
through.
Well-
have four things they want to accomplish. They wanted the Supreme Court justice, they got
Yes.
him. They want health care gone and
Yeah.
replaced. They want tax, and they want infrastructure.
Yes.
And once they've done that,
Then
then
that's it.
they can do without Trump.
So here's what I want.
Yeah.
I want the Republicans and the Democrats to work together to come up with a system that will support us.
Why would they do that?
Because
it's a serious
the-
question.
I think because right now everyone is so uptight and becoming angry until the country is not functioning as it should. We got to bring the country together, and the only way that we can bring it together is for our leaders to decide to work with each other to make the country a better place.
But look at what happened when the Republicans said, my number one goal, Mitch McConnell, publicly
Yes.
said, my number one goal is to make Obama a one-term
One-time
president. And you know what? Other than the fact that Obama was reelected, he got everything else. He now runs the
Yeah.
government.
And in the
Why-
meantime, he was able to pretty much stop,
Right.
Yeah.
legislatively anything Obama
Everything,
wanted to do, like
everything,
fix Obamacare, Neil Gorsuch.
So why should now the Democrats say, we're the better people?
No,
We'll go along with the program even though you screwed us royally, and we'll continue to screw us royally, but we'll go along with the program because we're better people.
no, the Democrats needn't say that they are better people. They need to say that we didn't work well together during Obama, and we have learned something from that. Let us get together and work for the system for our people that we represent.
I think they are going to work with the people that they represent. The question is, can they come together with, the Trump administration and what they're pushing, and, the House and Senate leader on the Republican side, what they're pushing, they're very ideologically
And that's why they
different.
need to sit down and work together.
Well, that's
You
that's a very good thought. Actually, they should work together. But as long as they have the power, they don't care. Why should Republicans work with Democrats?
The Republicans
have
are
no
not
incentive.
even looking for the
Yeah.
Democrats. They keep saying, I got 50
Yeah.
votes, or I've
That's
got
it.
212
Right.
votes. I don't, or 220. I don't need any Democratic support. Why would I make any concession whatsoever?
They
Because
even
they
chose-
need to get re-elected.
yeah, but they
in the
will.
future.
They're going to get reelected if they represent what they think their voters, not their districts, their voters want them to do.
Perhaps, but the country and the voters, everyone, Republican and Democrats, want the country to be less tense and work together.
I know a lot of people in Massachusetts, by the way, in Burlington, who were perfectly happy with the way things are, and the tension is because of all these people who want to give away money and rights and privilege and all this other stuff from the good rock, salt of the earth American,
Yes,
whoever
I
the
mean-
hell that may be.
I mean, that is actually the gist of whole base of Trump, that you want to basically appeal to that base, and Republicans have learned